The small village of Ross's Point in the port city of Sligo is tucked away in the northwest corner of Ireland. The idyllic landscape and beaches seem almost magical and would actually attract tourists. But that is not the case. The village is so unknown that strangers rarely come here. All the more reason for the village and its inhabitants to be thrown into turmoil on June 16, 2009. At around 6 o'clock in the morning, Arthur Kinsella and his son Brian are on the beach. Brian is training for a triathlon and the beach is the perfect place for it. But Arthur and he notice something quite different. A man in swimming trunks is lying motionless on the beach, face down. As the two of them approach him, they quickly realize that he is dead. It appears as if he drowned and was washed up on the beach. The police initially assume that it was a swimming accident as well. But as they try to find out who the man is, they gradually realize that this case is unlike any other they have had before. No one knows the stranger or is missing anyone who fits the description, and the police just can't figure out who the man is. Quickly, the theory arises that he may have intentionally wanted to conceal his identity. Some question whether he might have been a spy. For others, the case is so mysterious that the only explanation for it is that the man was a time traveler. But one thing at a time. Let's start at the beginning. Today we are talking about the case of Peter Bergmann, a case that couldn't be more mysterious. Police are baffled. A day ago, a lifeless man was found on the beach at Ross's Point. Investigators have been hard at work since then trying to determine the man's identity and notify his next of kin. No one could have anticipated that this would be a very tricky task. The deceased is an older man. He's 1.75 meters tall, has blue eyes, dark eyebrows, and gray hair. Based on the autopsy performed, the coroner estimates the man to be between 55 and 60 years old. He feverishly searches for clues that may indicate the cause of death or the man's identity. The gold tooth in the upper jaw of the deceased is particularly striking. Initially, the investigators suspect an accident in the water, but the man's clothing raises doubts. When he was found, the dead man was wearing green Speedo swimming trunks with pink and purple stripes. On top of that, he had underpants and a blue shirt on. So, not classic swimwear. A neatly folded stack of clothes is found on a rock near the body. The clothes include a pair of black shoes in size 10.5, German size 44, made in Germany in 2002, a blue wool sweater, blue wool socks, a black leather belt, a pair of blue trousers in size 50, and a black leather jacket. Both items of clothing are from the C&A brand. It is noticeable that the labels have been carefully removed from all the clothes. The dead man also had handkerchiefs from a German brand with him, as well as painkillers that are only prescribed in Germany. This combination of evidence suggests that the deceased was German. But despite intensive investigation, the cause of his death remains a mystery for the time being. There are no signs of drowning, as no water is found in his lungs. Although the autopsy shows that the man apparently had heart problems, a clear connection between the heart problems and the cause of his death cannot be established. Another peculiarity is that the man is missing a kidney, but everything indicates that it was removed several years ago. What is particularly striking, however, is that the man had been seriously ill for quite some time. He suffered from advanced prostate cancer with metastases in his bones and lungs. It can be assumed that he was aware that he had cancer, as he must have been suffering from severe pain. Interestingly, investigators found painkillers near his body, but no traces of painkillers or other medication could be detected in his blood. In his condition, however, he should have been taking some kind of medication. The coroner states that the man would have had only a few weeks to live. However, none of the abnormalities found during the autopsy explain how the man died. There is no clear evidence of a direct cause of death, leading investigators to suspect a sudden cardiac arrest for now. It is assumed that the man may have suffered a heart attack while out walking and died as a result. Nevertheless, the man's identity remains a mystery, which is why investigators are trying to reconstruct the last few days before his death. However, what they discover raises legitimate doubts as to whether the man's death was an accident. The unidentified man appears to have entered Northern Ireland on June 12, 2009, as he first appears on camera. However, there are no entry documents and no witnesses who have seen him on a train, plane, or ship. It can only be speculated that he came from Germany, as many of the items found indicate a German origin. At 4 p.m., the man is first seen on camera at the bus station in Derry. He's wearing sunglasses and has a black laptop bag and a black travel bag with him. CCTV shows the man getting on a bus bound for the coastal town of Sligo. After a 2-hour journey, he gets off at 6:28 p.m. and takes a taxi. The taxi driver later reports that the man had a distinct German accent. He asks the driver to take him to a cheap hotel. It can be assumed that the man did not know his way around Sligo, as there were some cheap hotels near the bus station. The first hotel the driver takes him to is already fully booked. The man books a room for 3 nights and pays the €65 per night directly in cash. The hotel staff also notice his strong German accent. He checks in under the name Peter Bergmann and gives the address as Einstedtersen 15 in 4472 Vienna, an address that does not exist. Unfortunately, the hotel staff do not notice this because they do not ask to see any identification documents. As a result, they also do not notice that the man's name is probably also fictitious. There is no evidence of a person named Peter Bergmann who has legally entered the United Kingdom. And no man with this name is missing in Germany or Austria either. Peter Bergmann goes to his room. Over the next 3 days, he leaves the hotel a total of 13 times. And each time, he carries a purple plastic bag with unknown contents. The security cameras in the coastal town of Sligo capture him every time he leaves the hotel. He is always on his own and never on the phone. Despite the large number of cameras, Peter Bergmann somehow manages to cleverly avoid them at the crucial moments. He appears to be in Sligo for the first time. Nevertheless, he uses the blind spots of the cameras as if he were already very familiar with the area. What is in the plastic bag and what he does with it remains a mystery. All we know is that he returns to the hotel without the bag every time. It remains unclear whether he has 13 identical bags and disposes of each one with its contents, or whether he possibly empties the bag, folds it up, and puts it in his inside jacket pocket to take back to the hotel. We will come back to the possible contents of the bag later. On Saturday, June 13th, Peter Bergmann leaves the hotel and goes to the nearby post office. There he buys 10 stamps, each worth 82 cents, as well as airmail stickers. In 2009, it cost 82 cents in Ireland to send a letter to another country. Unfortunately, there are technical problems with the security of the surveillance footage from the post office, so the police don't know whether Peter Bergmann was carrying pre-written letters and dropping them in the letterbox immediately. At no other time is he filmed carrying letters or dropping anything in a letterbox. It is possible that Peter Bergmann used the plastic bag to transport the letters unnoticed. The next day, a cleaning lady knocks on door 705, which is Peter Bergmann's room. But he doesn't open and doesn't respond to calls either. Worried, the employees finally decide to open the door. When the door opens, Peter Bergmann stands in his room, surprised. It almost seems as if they had caught him doing something. But he seems to be doing well, so the hotel staff leave him alone again. Between 11 and 11:30 a.m., Peter Bergmann leaves the hotel with a map of the city in his hand and looks for a taxi. He asks the driver, Jared Higgins, to take him to Strand Hill near Sligo Bay because he would like to go swimming. The driver advises him against it because the beach is mainly a surfing beach and not ideal for swimming. Peter Bergmann then asks the taxi driver if he knows a less visited beach where he can swim in peace. Jared Higgins recommends the beach near the village of Ross's Point. Peter Bergmann seems to agree and lets the taxi driver take him to that beach. Later, it is speculated that he originally wanted to go to Sligo Bay because of the Dead Man's Point statue, which he wanted to use to make his death even more mysterious. The statue shows a woman stretching out her arms and is said to date back to a sailor who was buried there after dying while his ship was entering Sligo Bay. Jared Higgins particularly notices Peter Bergmann's accent and his gold tooth. He remembers that Peter Bergmann liked to talk and told him that he was Austrian. However, Peter Bergmann does not get out when they arrive at the beach. Instead, he spends 15 minutes looking at the beach from the car and then wants to be driven back. He asks to be dropped off at a bus stop and pays with a €20 bill. The next day, June 15th, he informs the front desk that he would like a late checkout at around 1 p.m. He finally checked out at 1:06 p.m. and handed in his room keys. He was carrying the purple plastic bag, his black laptop bag, and a dark-colored tote bag. He no longer had the black duffel bag that he had been carrying at the beginning of his trip. Since he was found with very little luggage, including no change of clothes, it can be assumed that he disposed of all his belongings in the days before his disappearance. It is thought that he used the purple plastic bag for this purpose and took parts of his luggage with him every day and threw them away somewhere. If he only disposed of 1 or 2 items at a time, this would also explain why the items could not be found again, even though the police searched the area and the garbage cans in Sligo for many days. This approach would suggest that Peter Bergmann planned his mysterious death in the same way and wanted to conceal his identity as best as possible. After leaving the hotel, he walks along Quay Street and Wine Street before arriving at the Quayside Shopping Center. He enters the shopping center and stands by the door for a few minutes before leaving at 1:16 p.m. and continuing on his way. At this point, he still has his 3 bags with him. He continues along Wine Street to the bus station. At the bus station, he is filmed entering a small cafe and ordering a cappuccino and a sandwich at 1:38 p.m. He sits down at a table with a man and a woman, but does not exchange a word with them. While he is eating his sandwich, he takes a piece of paper out of his laptop bag. He writes something on it, then tears it up and throws it away. The note cannot be found later, and the patrons cannot remember what Peter Bergmann had written on it. Investigators speculate that he may have kept a list of things he wanted to do or remembered to do. He might have gotten everything on his list done at the cafe, which is why he threw the note away. Vincent Dunbar, the local deputy inspector, is returning from his lunch break when Peter Bergmann approaches him and asks him where the bus to Ross's Point is leaving from. Vincent later says about the encounter, "I found out later that he must have gone swimming, but he didn't seem like a man who goes swimming. The way he was dressed and what he was carrying. If someone went swimming, you usually knew about it. People have a rolled-up towel with them and rolled-up clothes. That was not the case with him at all. He looked like a man who was on a business trip." Peter Bergmann doesn't thank Vincent for his help, but simply turns around and leaves. It appears to him as if Peter Bergmann is in a hurry, in pain, or just not himself. At 2:40 p.m., Peter Bergmann finally gets on the bus to Ross's Point. It is a sunny day, so there are many people around when Peter Bergmann arrives at the beach. With his chic outfit, he stands out so much that 16 witnesses later report having seen him. Paula Lahif, who visits the beach with her husband that day, describes, for example, "We had parked in the upper parking lot. There was this man walking along the shore. He had his trousers rolled up to his knees, was wearing a black jacket and walked somewhat awkwardly." Her husband Dermot adds the following, "He walked very deliberately, one foot then the other. I noticed how strange his movements were, and it seemed like some kind of ritual to go from left to right." At 11:50 p.m., Peter Bergmann is seen for the last time by a witness walking barefoot through shallow water carrying a plastic bag. The next time Peter Bergmann is seen is when Arthur Kinsella and his son find his body 7 hours later. So his last steps have been relatively well reconstructed. Nevertheless, one question still hangs over everything. Who is Peter Bergmann? The police are faced with a big mystery when they look deeper into Peter Bergmann and his death. No matter where they start their investigation, they quickly realize that they won't get very far. Both the German and Austrian police are involved in the investigation because it is assumed that Peter Bergmann is either from Germany or Austria. The address he gave at the hotel doesn't exist, but the structure and number of digits correspond to Austrian postal codes, suggesting that Peter Bergmann either comes from Austria or has done his research. Nevertheless, it is more likely that Peter Bergmann is from Germany, as his accent, the brands of his clothing, the handkerchief pack, and, above all, the prescription painkillers he carried indicate. To this day, it is impossible to find out how Peter Bergmann came to Ireland. There are no witnesses who saw him at an airport or on a ship, and so it is not known where he came from. It is also strange that, despite an extensive search, many of the things that Peter Bergmann was still carrying during the bus ride cannot be found. There is no trace of his shoulder bag or his laptop bag. The purple plastic bag is also not among the items on the shore. When he left the hotel, he was also wearing a long-sleeved shirt that cannot be found. Peter Bergmann's glasses cannot be found either, although witnesses report that he was still wearing them on the beach a few hours before his death. It is possible that he threw his things into the sea, but on the one hand, it is quite likely that at least some of them would have been washed up again. And on the other hand, the question arises as to why he did not do the same with all of his things. As already mentioned, some selected items of clothing were neatly folded and placed on a rock. But these are by no means all the unanswered questions. Peter Bergmann did not drown, and no medication was found in his blood. So what did he die of? Everything points to sudden cardiac arrest, which is not entirely unlikely given his advanced cancer and heart problems. But if Peter Bergmann had planned his death, as his actions in the last few days suggest, how could he have known that he would die on that exact day at that exact time? Nobody seems to know the stranger. There is no match for his DNA and fingerprints, and he is not missing from anywhere. On September 18, 2009, he is finally buried in an unmarked grave in Sligo. The only guests are 4 police officers. To this day, it remains a great mystery who Peter Bergmann was and how he could know when he would die. Detective Inspector Ray Mulderick of Sligo Garda Station says of the case, "Normally we deal with the opposite case, where people go missing and we can't find them. In this case, it's different because we have a person who we can't fully identify and we can't return his body to his next of kin. There seems to be an intention behind it. Everything he did seemed to have a purpose. From cutting the labels off his clothes to everything else. The question you have to ask is why Sligo? If you're looking for a scenic place to die, you're spoiled for choice on the west coast of Ireland or even in Scotland. Something must have led him here, even though we could never say what it was." The former investigator John O'Reilly still puzzles over who Peter Bergmann might have been. When someone dies, that alone is a terrible thing. But why then do everything to conceal your identity? This man didn't just come to Ireland to die. It remains uncertain what Peter Bergmann's intentions were. However, his actions in the days leading up to his death seem extremely well thought out. There are now some very outlandish theories about Peter Bergmann's death. For example, some believe that he was an alien lost on Earth, or a time traveler who returned to his time. Others suspect that Peter Bergmann was a spy or a gangster who was on the run. The theory that is most widely accepted is also the one that seems most realistic to me. Peter Bergmann must have known that he had a severe case of cancer and that he only had a few weeks to live. It is possible that he suffered greatly from his pain and no longer wanted to live, which is why he stopped taking his medication. This would explain why no traces of medication were found in his blood. He may have disguised his identity to ensure that his relatives either do not find out about his death or do not have to bear the costs of a funeral. He may have had few relatives, and those who did may not have been well off. And a funeral costs a relatively large amount of money. The fact that he bought stamps and they were not found among his belongings suggests that he sent several letters. Perhaps he wrote to his relatives asking them not to report him missing because he wanted to remain anonymous. He may have chosen the pseudonym Peter Bergmann because there is actually a single person with that name in Vienna. a crime fiction writer. It is possible that he was always a fan of puzzles and mysteries and wanted to become one himself at the end of his life. But this theory also has gaps. The case has also caused quite a stir in Germany and Austria. It is highly unlikely that no one knows the man. Why is he not missing? Why do not acquaintances, neighbors, or colleagues recognize him? Even if he has asked his closest confidants not to come forward, there are bound to be more distant acquaintances who will recognize him. And although Peter Bergmann didn't have long to live, it's still almost impossible to plan your death so precisely and purposefully. As already mentioned, there is no evidence whatsoever to suggest suicide, drowning, or any external influence. So how could Peter Bergmann know exactly when he would die? Presumably, Peter Bergmann successfully took this secret with him to the grave, as he wished. And that's the end of today's video. In my opinion, the case of Peter Bergmann is extremely mysterious. Do you have any idea how Peter Bergmann managed to estimate so accurately when he would die? Or was it just a coincidence? I'm very curious to hear your theories in the comments. If there is an update in the Peter Bergmann case at some point, I will of course let you know. If you want to support me and if you liked the video, please feel free to leave a like, comment, and/or subscribe. This supports the channel a lot because it helps us to trick the algorithm a bit, and the video is also suggested to people who have not yet subscribed to Insolito. If you like, you can also follow me on Instagram or on my Discord. You can find the links in the info box. Thank you very much in advance, and thank you for watching. I wish you a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you watch the video, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao guys.